Since the early 19 teens, both Harley-Davidson and Indian have played a vital role in America's war efforts. This week on Drive for History, we're highlighting rare military machines, and today we've got two 100% original motorcycles here at the museum I wanted to share with you. Our 1918 Harley-Davidson Model FUS, and then the one-of-a-kind, ultra-rare 1917 Messenger Pigeon Carrier. We're going to be cranking up the 1918 Twin here shortly, kind of taking you through the overall starting procedures of an early teens era motorcycle. The bike runs absolutely fantastic. But first, I wanted to tell you about the 17 Messenger Pigeon Carrier. Now, Messenger pigeons had been in use for military for literally hundreds of years. And in 1917, Harley-Davidson employed the Signet rear car company to actually make an attachment for one of their Harley-Davidson twin-cylinder motorcycles. So as you can see in the photo here, 1917, this is actually Pigeon Carrier headquarters. You see the building in the background, the two guys here both holding pigeons. So the rear car setup, ultra rare. It's the only one I've ever seen, made by the Signet company out of Buffalo, New York. And the way that this thing works is they would actually put the pigeons in the back of the car, take them out to the front lines or wherever it may be, and they were actually trained to fly back to Pigeon Carrier headquarters there. This machine remarkably survives in almost entirely original condition. Now the bike, 1917 Harley-Davidson Twin. In 1917, they made about 18,000 motorcycles, so production was high. This example, one of few remaining original paint examples left, and the bike's got quite a story. Now, this motorcycle was at one point owned by Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen, kind of an interesting story. Steve McQueen found the bike on a movie set. This bike back in the 1950s, I think it was 1954, was used in the movie Spirit of St. Louis with James Stewart. The bike was put into the prop shed and stored for many years, and then sometime later Steve got into the prop shed, discovered the 1917 motorcycle, and actually purchased it off the movie company. So oddly enough, the motorcycle had been separated from the Pigeon Carrier itself. So Steve found the bike just in its two-wheeled form. Now, movie set motorcycle, as you can see on this side, you've got a military gas tank. Other side is civilian gas tank. Neat setup. All the civilian scenes, they'd set the bike up to go that way. All your military scenes, you use the same motorcycle, turn it around, and you got a military machine going the other way. So the bike was actually sold at the McQueen Estate auction in 1983 and 84. Dale was actually out at the auction and saw this motorcycle. Didn't purchase it. Actually, Dale purchased a 1949 Cadillac and drove it home from Las Vegas to Mount Vernon, Illinois. Saw the Pigeon Carrier out there, or saw the 17 Harley out there. Had some interest in it, but didn't end up buying the motorcycle. Fast forward about 10 years, he's on a cross-country trip, stops at a truck stop in Arizona, pulls in to get gas. As he's filling up, truck pulls in, and this motorcycle's in the back of the truck next to him. So being the outgoing guy that he is, of course, strikes up a conversation with the fellow about his old bike, learned a little bit about the history, remembered the motorcycle, and actually purchased the bike right there from him on the spot. 10 minutes later, they're unloading the motorcycle and putting it onto Dale's truck. So that's 1993. Fast forward another 10 years, and Dale's at a swap meet in Ole, Pennsylvania. The Ole Antique Bike Meet is one of the biggest antique motorcycles in the country. Every year, folks bring out their barns and garages and sprinkle old motorcycle parts over a huge fairground. Quite a week of swapping and trading and buying and selling. Dale actually saw this Signet rear car at the Ole swap meet, managed to make a deal with it and bring it back here to the museum. And when he got the bike back to the museum, there were actually parts from the motorcycle in the back of the carrier, if you can believe that. Some parts from the carrier still attached to the motorcycle. So 15, 20, 30 minutes later, after hooking the assembly back up, the 1917 Messenger Pigeon Carrier rear attachment was reunited with the motorcycle. It's just amazing how things come back together and stories like this happen repeatedly here at Wheels Through Time. Just one awesome, awesome motorcycle And one of our favorites here, our earliest military machine here at the museum, 1917 twin. So as you can see, it's entirely original, very much like the 1918 twin cylinder machine right here. Now this is a Model FUS, 1918, twin cylinder, magneto ignition, sidecar rig. So sidecars commonly used in the military. Actually, this machine is nearly identical to the first Harley-Davidson motorcycle that entered Germany on 11/12/1918. So 102 years ago, the first Harley-Davidson military machine entered Germany. Today, we're staring at a motorcycle almost identical. Now, as far as production figures in 1918, a lot of you guys might be wondering where we get our figures from for machines of this vintage. Kind of the iconic and the definitive resource as far as Harley-Davidson production numbers through the early 1970s is this book, The Legend Begins. Legend Begins highlights production numbers, different models, options of all the motorcycles dating back actually to 1903. Here it says 1918. They made over 8,000 military motorcycles. Total production was 26,000 machines, if you can believe that. So 102 years ago, Harley-Davidson's building 26,000 machines in a year. Really pretty remarkable stuff. Now this bike is completely original. And it absolutely runs like a top. It runs so well that over 10 years ago, Dale was asked to be a part of the Lincoln Highway tribute at the presidential inauguration in Washington, D.C. He actually took this bike out, dialed it back in, tuned it up, air in the tires, and rode it through the entire presidential inauguration parade back in 2008. And if I remember right, it was something like 10 or 15 degrees the whole day. It was incredibly cold. Inauguration parade was in January. So incredibly cold weather. This bike ran like an absolute top. It was so cold out during the parade that new Harley-Davidson motorcycles for the escorts were just too cold for the bikes to run, and this old 1918 Harley just chugged along the whole way, really never even got hot. So pretty incredible motorcycle. Now in 1918, Harley-Davidson's twin cylinder was 1,000 cc's, 3-speed machine. So this bike really is kind of a continuation of something Harley began producing in 1915. Of course, updated in styling, magneto ignition. And again, you've got the twin cylinder engine. We've got some new spark plugs in. If you notice, we've got some new Firestone plugs in, and we're going to get this thing fired up. So what I want to do today is actually take you guys through the starting procedure on a motorcycle like this, and it's really pretty simple. The way I always put it is, 100 years ago, people knew a lot less about motorcycles than we know now. So it had to be easy to use. It had to be simple. So this bike, actually, we filled it up with gas a little bit ago. We noticed there was a little bit of a weep on the bottom of the gas tank. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this bike off of a bladder. We've got the bladder filled up with gasoline. I'm going to run a remote fuel line here, and we should be running in just about no time. So we'll turn the fuel on. Now I've already got this bike. I've already got the bike oiled, so all your external moving components, rocker arms, push rods, everything's been oiled. We've got an oil level set properly in the bottom end, a little bit of oil in the oil tank. So as this float bowl is filling up with gas right now, what I'm going to do is take you through the starting procedure. Now, magneto ignition, there's no key to a motorcycle like this. Now, Harley-Davidson came out with an electric model with a generator in 1915, operated your horn and your headlights as well as the machine's ignition. So you'd have a generator, a coil, a distributor, and a battery that would supply the spark to the motor. So with the magneto, it's kind of a self-perpetuating spark. So there's no switches to this bike. Literally, you can just get on it and kick it. Schebler carburetor right here. This is what we call an HX model Schebler. Really a primitive design. Dates back really kind of to the earliest days. I think Harley-Davidson's first year for a Schebler carburetor was 1909 on their single-cylinder machines. So as you notice, it's got this different mouth than a regular or Schebler or Linkert style carburetor, the choke is right here. So what you're doing, there's actually a flap in here, a leather flap. It's tapered and it's spring loaded, and that's your air metering device. So the tension of the spring is what sets the amount of air that's able to get by the leather flap here. So by pulling the choke on, what we're doing is we're richening the mixture for startup. Now the engine's cold right now, and it should just take a few kicks to start. Now this bike hasn't been run since 2008. It's been quite some time. The presidential inauguration parade was the last time we had this thing out and about. So again, guys, magneto ignition, relatively simple stuff. Now, left hand grip, you've got your spark advance. That advances and retards the ignition timing. So under optimal circumstances, when you're running down the road, spark happens before top dead center. What you can do with your timing here is you can actually bring that timing backwards a little bit, make it a little bit later. It makes the bike easier to start. Throttle here, just like on any motorcycle. We've got the choke on, Kickstarter over this way. So bike's in neutral, clutch is disengaged, and we ought to have this thing running in 1 or 2 or 3 kicks maybe. There's one. Let's do it first. There you have it, guys, just like the day it was parked. 1918 Harley Davidson military machine, completely original condition. Guys, thanks for joining us on the Military Week for our Drive for History. We've been firing up all sorts of rare motorcycles. We're cranking up more machines for you next week. I hope you join us. Remember, if you're digging what you see, make sure you check out driveforhistory.com. We rely entirely on you guys' contributions. Thanks for everything you do, and we'll see you next week.